Welcome to another edition of Exit Philosophy. We're opening our third year of the podcast, and I'd like to thank all of our listeners for their participation, for their feedback, and for liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast. It's been fun, and Mal Ramanan, my co-host, we learn more about the team and about baseball just by having these discussions. Talk about things we haven't even thought about and then are forced to think about it. And it's really been a lot of fun for me. I don't know about for you, Mal.
Oh, it's been fantastic for me. Obviously, I haven't been with you the whole time, but since I have, it's been great, and I really enjoy, staying on top of the goings-ons. And obviously, we do that anyways. But when you do a weekly podcast, you know, you ensure that you're up to date with all the news, and I think you enjoy the sport better. And like you said, I get lots of feedback from listeners. There's a lot of people that have jumped on board and given me feedback, and that's much appreciated because sometimes you miss a lot of things, and it helps you form your own opinions. So
Yeah,
I
for
also
sure.
appreciate the listener feedback. And where would you be if people weren't listening? So thank you.
I
It'd
find
just be
that,
me and you doing the same thing we've done many times in a bar. So
right. Yeah. I find that sharing an opinion, and if you change your mind on something, it's not a matter of not being consistent. It's a matter of hearing other opinions, and an evolving opinion is more important than a steadfast, I won't change my mind. This is what I think opinion. That's my
yeah.
opinion. And I'm
Well, I'd like to
sticking to
think
it.
nobody knows more about it than we do, but that
Yeah.
would be really silly. So you got
So
to be open to other people's opinions.
before we get into it, we're recording Thursday morning, and last night, Wednesday, was the first game of the Four Nations. I was
Oh, right.
totally impressed by that, especially if you compare it to what the All-Star game format has been in hockey, and the NBA is the same thing. It's a ho-hum yawning affair. But last night with Sweden and Canada certainly wasn't. What were your impressions on that, Mal?
Well, as I've said to many people, that was one hell of a hockey game. And obviously, I don't think that's something you can repeat on an annual basis. So I think, for what it is, it's going to be the best option we have for 2025. And, as this thing moves on, I mean, it's a very short tournament. I think you're going to see a continuation of this. I think you might be disappointed tonight with USA Finland. I think there's a distinct disparity on the quality of the teams, but to see the passion in the players, that's all anybody wants. I mean, like that was as you know good a quality of the game as you're going to see. The obviously the talent that was on that ice was unbelievable. So I was locked in. It was a pleasure, and I can't wait for Saturday. The two games Saturday. I want to watch both of them. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I disagree with you on the mismatch Finland and U.S. Finland always has great goaltending, and it might be a shooting
For
gallery for
sure.
the U.S. I mean, they might outshoot them 48-12 or something, but it'll be a game because the Finnish goaltending has always been spectacular.
And most importantly, you're going to get max effort, which is really what you're looking for.
Yeah,
So I'll be tuned in for sure. So yeah, regardless of the outcome, it's not an exhibition, even though it is, if you know what I mean. These guys are
yeah.
going hard, which is what you wanted.
I'm not the Lone Ranger in this regard, but you see the opening of the Canada power play and that fabulous goal that came within a minute and a half of the start of the game. But then you look at Canadian goaltending, and I mean, like says over the years that Canada is not producing enough top flight goaltending, and Jordan Binnington, God bless him, but every time there was a three-man entry of Swedes into the zone, I felt like I was watching a ground ball go to Davis Schneider. It was like the play is likely to be made, but there's always a question.
There's you get a little nervous.
Oh yeah. But no matter the outcome, and there's no big deal whether you get a gold, silver, bronze in this tournament. It's just a great exhibition and a great add for NHL hockey moving forward.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
as you said, it's not something that they can reproduce every year.
Yeah, and it looks like everybody's fully engaged, except maybe for Willie Nylander.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outside of that, maybe you know,
How
maybe
about
they'll drag his passion out of him for the
how,
next game.
how about a little back checking on that third Canadian goal? That
Well,
make
he
that
turned the
much.
puck over, and then he was a passenger just watching the play, right? I mean, it's just like, thanks, Willie, both ends of the ice.
The now the Super Bowl. We on our last
Oh,
episode
yeah, that was
leading
exciting.
into the Super Bowl Sunday, which was a dud. The game was a dud. I know I'm in the minority, but I really enjoyed the halftime show. Uh,
That would be more up your alley for sure.
yeah,
Oh, it is. I mean, you
yes,
enjoy.
but and Serena Williams, like that appearance was just awesome,
Right.
especially at the time of the performance where it was a diss of Drake, who,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Correct.
um, so we both had it pegged with the Eagles winning that game because of all the reasons we cited. The Eagles were better than they were 2 years ago. The Chiefs weren't as good as they were 2 years ago, and it all came to fruition in a rout basically for the Eagles. So you finished the year 26-21 against the spread. I finished 28-19, and I hope people were paying attention and using our recommendations,
Right.
especially in the playoffs and down the stretch.
Well, they better get excited for next year when we give it a full season.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I think that's 54 and 40, right? That's a sweet return of 10 units. So, whatever your unit size is, that's not so bad. We'll have to
Yeah.
well, we are hanging our hat on that, and there's no
Yeah,
question.
right. It's not like we're being humble about it,
No,
right?
no, no, absolutely not. So can't wait for next year, that's for sure.
Um, the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. They made their announcement this week. They were supposed to do it at the end of last week, but a couple of things came up. I know that you've got, let me read the list here. It's Jose Bautista, Eric Bedard, Greg Hamilton from Baseball Canada. There's two women players from the Canadian National Program, and Jerry Snyder, who was the Paul Godfrey before Paul Godfrey was in terms of bringing baseball to Montreal and creating the Expos, which led, of course, to the efforts of Paul Godfrey and his supporters in bringing the Blue Jays to Toronto. So it's a great class. I know you have strong opinions on Jose Bautista. Let's hear them.
Oh, for sure. I think that's obviously what you would call a no-brainer. To me, you know what Jose represents? I mean, obviously getting to that playoff run in 2015, seeing his career arc and what that represented to this community. To me, that team was kind of the rebirth of this franchise. It really was. You had, the initial rise, which everybody enjoyed, from being, a bad expansion team, but you could obviously everybody loved it, and that just watching that team slowly rise, get into the playoffs, and then of course culminating with the Joe Carter, the two World Series. And then there was some pretty dark years of which, we were witness to or a part of, on some level. It got stagnant. The franchise, the attendance, it was poor for a lot of years. We talk about Interbrew and those dark years. And then that turnaround in 215, Jose was the face of it. And to have those moments, to have the flip game, what it meant to me personally to be, obviously inside there and with Jose and that celebratory moment, in the clubhouse. And just to me, it's almost at the moment, it felt like a bigger home run than Joe Carter's. I mean, obviously it didn't win a World Series, but in that moment, what it represented to the fan base, to the sporting community of Toronto. That was Jose Batista, man, and the way he carried himself. Jose was not among us. I don't know what to tell you. He had that air about him of superiority, but in a classy, lovable way. I don't know how else to say it. Like we were in Jose's world. We all had to, survive it and enjoy it. All those experiences. When he was done playing, I just said it was a pleasure to be witness to that existence. It was kind of comical at times the way he would make media wait for him. How, very smart man, very intelligent man. And it was just, I think what he represents to Canadian baseball is just it's just such a no-brainer. I just had I just think a lot of Jose Batista, and it's an experience, not just
Yeah.
he's
I,
an experience.
yeah, I just want to follow up on that, carrying himself differently. And he reminded me so much, Jose reminded me so much of Felipe Alou in terms of
Interesting.
knowing what people's preconceived notion was of a Dominican player.
Right.
And they wanted to show that Dominicans can be better than you or like everyone else. And they both understood the underlying racial undertones that were accompanying a lot of the attitudes towards them, and yet they held themselves above it. And I had seen Jose's attitude in Felipe Alou years before. And so it made me smile because I recognized it. But as you said, it was never an arrogance that was demeaning to anyone they were speaking to. It was all self contained and within. And it was
Confidence too, right?
confidence. Yeah. And the thing I asked Jose on the conference call, I said, I reminded him when he won the All-Star voting, fan voting 2 years in a row, why that was. Because, I mean, there were other players that would have seemed to be more popular and whatever. And,
Right.
and his answer at the time at the All-Star game press conference was that, and it was with a smile. He said, I have two countries behind me. I have the Dominican and I have Canada. And that stopped the discussion right there because it's true. Everyone says in Major League Baseball that Canadians use the internet and use computer voting more than anybody in any poll. You put a Canadian on a list of major leaguers, and he can be like middle of the pack, and he'll win the poll
Well,
because
and that's
that's
also,
the way we are.
and
And
that's also when we talk about attracting people to this market. I mean, and everybody references the negative. I mean, it's one of the biggest positives you've got an entire country that is supportive if you do the right things.
yeah,
If
well,
you do the right things, they want to support you, and you
right.
don't have that anywhere else. It is a
But
massive positive.
having been there, and you've been there, both of us having worked within the organization, I think they're going a little overboard with this. We play for an entire country, and they're using that as their marketing. They're using that as their sale pitch to Roki Sasaki and guys like that. And like, come on, okay, let it be organic, let it happen, but you can't keep just using that and pumping your own tires like that. Have someone else do it.
For sure. I mean, but I think it is an interesting way to attract players. It is an advantage you have to use because it's not fake. There is no other team, and the passion for this country does go, from coast to coast, as they say. It is real. I've experienced it. You've experienced it, especially doing those winter tours. Um, it was like bringing the Beatles around for crying out
Yeah.
loud.
And
No,
I
seriously.
I
And I know what you're
love
saying, but hey, man,
I,
it's
yeah.
something you've got to use.
I love being on that Seattle trip and seeing the reaction of the first time Blue Jays that go there.
Oh,
Like it's crazy, especially just even walking to the ballpark in the middle of the afternoon for a night game, and everybody's in their Blue Jays gear and starting to drink heavily,
yeah,
and it's so much fun and it's great. I was always able to get a column out of first time Jays seeing the flow, the
right.
river of blue when the gates open, coming down to the field to see BP and get autographs. It was great.
Yeah, no question.
The other thing that I told Jose as a follow up to that question was, you're the sixth Dominican to go into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. Pedro Martinez, Vlad Sr., Felipe, George Bell, Tony Fernandez, and Jose. I said, what
Nice.
is it about the two countries that makes them so simpatico? And he had to think about it, but he came up with a nice answer for it. He didn't realize that there were so many. I don't think a lot of people would realize there were that many. But the Dominicans who have made he mentioned the fact that the Jays were one of the first teams
And that's the big reason.
academy to
That's
have an
the big reason.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they saw an opportunity there, right? And we're smart enough. I mean, it's smart enough to go into that market, and you developed a real fan base outside of just, a development program there. So no
Yeah.
question.
And then Eric Bedard he came up at the time in the early 2000s. He had a chance to be one of the top left-handed pitchers in baseball. I mean, he had back-to-back years in '06 and '07 where he was one of the
He
top
was.
pitchers. And even beyond that, when he was injury prone through the end of his career, his numbers, even though they were limited by injury, were above average. They were superior numbers in terms of WHIP and ERA and all the other strikeouts. One year he struck out 221 batters in 182 innings.
Yeah, when that wasn't as common.
Right. And
No Eric Bedard stories?
no, Eric Bedard, yeah, no, he was left out of Bob Elliott's book of Canadians. So if that was by mistake. Bob had to
Was it really?
apologize. but, but I think maybe that's what that sort of has soured.
Have you ever been in Bob's list?
Um, which list?
His top 100 Canadian.
Well, I was 64 this year.
Well, there you go. So I might, if you're in it and Eric's never been.
Yeah, yeah. But no, but Bob had written a book, and it
Yes.
included Major League
And he
Canadian.
didn't make it.
He didn't make it. No.
Wow. That's a tough look. There must be something to that.
So Greg Hamilton's the third choice that went in, the third man that went in, and like I am so eternally impressed with the impact that Greg Hamilton has had on Canadian baseball. I see it every year at the Baseball Canada banquet in January, held at the Northern Lights Ballroom at the Skydome Hotel. Um, it just the players that he had when they were 18 and now they're coming back and they're in their mid 30s and they get to eat dinner and talk to the new group of 18-year-olds. Just the continuity of the program, and that is all a credit to Greg Hamilton.
Well, I mean, the minute you bring up Canadian baseball, he's the poster boy, right? I mean, that's the first thing you think of is Greg Hamilton. The amount of work he's done for very many, many, many years with that program. And, um, let's be honest, one of the reasons I'm trying to do what I'm doing is because what Greg has brought to light with Canadian baseball, from where it started to where it is now. I mean, that man deserves all the credit in the world, and it's one of the reasons why we have so many Canadian ball players that are exceeding and excelling in a U.S. dominated industry for a long time. That's all Greg Hamilton and the hard work and promotion and just everything he's done for baseball. So it just give opportunity for everybody else that wants to partake in this industry in Canada.
Yeah, and one of the stats that I always love is the fact that, and Greg's a part of it. There's improved elite programs in Canada that are a big part of it, but there's twice as many Canadian athletes on scholarships and partial scholarships at
Correct.
U.S. schools as there are hockey players.
Right.
And
That's
like
right.
I know there's fewer programs, hockey programs in
Of
American
course.
universities, but you tell that to any American and they go, "What?" You know, that's just stunning to me that there's that many. And when they don't make it to um, pro ball, when the majority of them don't make it to pro ball, And I know your son Mattingly did for a while make it to pro ball, but they come back, even come back from college programs, and their understanding of baseball and how to teach it and how to transmit the proper way of playing makes baseball in Canada better.
Well, I can just to, just go back to when I was a kid and I was playing, and baseball was my first love over hockey, and I was a bit of a unicorn. N- I, I don't remember one person that I was aware of that was going to the U.S. in a scholarship. I'm sure there was a few, but very, very few. We played hockey and we played baseball locally, and to think of where that is now, more kids are on scholarships than in hockey. That's the ultimate tribute to Greg Hamilton and in where baseball is. And like you said, now this thing's feeding itself. People are playing and they're giving back and they're finding they can actually contribute and potentially even earn a living in this business, which was just laughable 40 years ago. You know what I mean? So how far it's come is amazing, and how far it can go is, obviously there's no ceiling on that. So
Yeah.
tip of the cap to Greg Hamilton for all of that.
So a shout out also to Amanda Assay and Arlene Naga, who were both in this. They're both passed away,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but they will be recognized, and families will be there on
Yeah,
June
that's
the
awesome.
7th when they go in. And
And
Jerry Snyder is the last one. Jerry Snyder was Paul Godfrey before Paul Godfrey was Paul Godfrey, because Jerry Snyder was a city councilor who was pesky at the winter meetings, always went down and said Montreal has Expo 67, and we're gonna be a major international city. You need to go international, Major League Baseball. Here's your chance. We will take a franchise. And that persistence on Jerry Snyder's part and others in the group created the Montreal Expos. And his daughter said on the conference call that the Blue Jays, when they were angling for an expansion franchise, tapped into his knowledge and expertise, and they called him quite often for advice. And so, congratulations to Jerry Snyder and his family.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, Today's first day of spring training, pitchers and catchers on the field. We've already seen video. Keegan Matheson, the great MLB.com reporter, has sent
He's moved
Max
in for the
Scherzer
few
throwing
months.
a no hitter so far in 2025. He looked great.
Yeah. Yeah,
Bo looked
everybody looks
great.
great. Yeah, everybody's happy. No,
Dalton Varsho looked great, like he might be ready. John
of
Schneider
course.
was glib at his first press conference, and like he looked great. Yeah, so everything looks great. The first day of spring training is always like that. But for you and for me and for anyone who worked in Major League Baseball, and I worked with the Expos for 22 years, and I went to like 15 spring trainings on the other coast. Then in 95 I came to cover the Blue Jays. Then I worked 4 years for them. So I had 45 consecutive spring trainings, and I got a couple of memories. But what are some of the highlights for you of just what spring training means in terms of the circle of life year to year?
It was undoubtedly the best time of the year. It was my favorite time. I know that sounds silly. I enjoyed it more than the regular season. I mean, and trust me, you enjoy the regular season and the journey the team is about to take. But there's, hope springs eternal, right? So, I mean, if you're not positive, if it's just not innate inside you, there's something wrong with you. It was easily my favorite time of year. Um, you know, everybody feels like they're going to present themselves as in their best manner. We all know, there's a little bit of a wink and a nod there, but you feel positive about everybody's potential, right? And the sunshine. The thing I like about spring training is everything happens early during the day,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
which is fantastic for for the obvious reasons. You get your evenings, which you can enjoy, and then you get that social aspect with the entire industry. You build bonds with the new people in the organization, players, staff. Uh, it's just a perfect setup for what's to come because once that season hits, it's a grind. As you know, you're playing every night, 7 days a week for the most part. So just the sunshine you get to enjoy, the weather. You set yourself up and you do what you have to do during the game. And the games don't matter. They're everybody's preparing, so there's no stress involved. It's just I enjoyed every part of it. I enjoyed
Yeah.
every part of Florida and just I, I miss it greatly. I wish I miss it greatly.
When I was prepping and trying to think of moments at spring training that, well, I wrote a column on the early years of my spring trainings on griffsthepitch.com about the 3 years that we spent in Daytona Beach when I first went down with the Expos, and it was freezing cold. It wasn't really like being in Florida until the middle of March.
Right.
But and anybody interested in that period can go on griffsthepitch.com and tap into it. But I was thinking of times when I was covering the Blue Jays, and the first thing I think of is getting off the plane, coming from February like today, where there's 20 centimeters of snow on the ground, flying to Florida, getting a rental car, and driving across the Courtney Campbell Causeway, rolling the windows down for the first time, and going, "Damn, this is life. This is
Yeah,
what life is all about, you know?"
for
And,
sure.
and
I
that was
remember
like,
that vividly.
yeah, that was, you just stick your head out the window and like a dog, like a dog going to looking for his bone. But, and then the second one was the ritual that I had with Tom Cheek. And it started in probably the early 2000s when I would go to Florida, and there was always two Toronto Star reporters, Mark Zielinski or Alan Ryan or Jim Byers, or there was a lot of different ones. But I was down writing columns for the whole camp because why not?
Yeah,
So they expected 5 columns a week, and I gave them 6 or 7.
yeah.
So they were fine with me taking a day off. And I would go to the ballpark, and I always had my golf clubs in the trunk of the rental car because that's what you do in Florida, just in case a
100%.
golf game breaks out. And I'd go to the park, and on the rare days when Tom Cheek would show up, if he caught my attention and gave me the little hand waggle, which is the universal sign of let's go play golf, I would call the office right away and say, "Okay, I'm not writing today." Even if it was like 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning,
Yeah.
not writing today. I wouldn't give him a reason. I'd just go talk to Tom. We would go to the golf course and would play 18. Part of the joy of spring training. And the one time was a foursome with Galen Cisco, Tom, me, and JP Ricciardi Sr. And Tom
Speaking of characters, oh my God, you just
Tom paired me up.
speaking of stories,
Paired me up with JP Sr. because he
this
knew
is beautiful.
you hated me.
Right, that's your
I
son.
was going to be his dad's partner for 18 holes in 5 hours. And I'm sure that his dad went home and said, "That Rich Griffin, he's such a nice guy. He's my partner." And Peak was giggling the whole way around the golf course because he knew exactly what he was doing.
100%.
And the next day I went to JP. I said, "JP, your dad is such a prince."
Oh man, you would have
And he
loved
was
that
like,
for sure.
"Joe."
Do.
And the other story that, before we move on to more, is the other story was the night that David Wells was acquired from the Yankees by the Blue Jays. The office, because at the time there was such a thing as newspaper scoops. Like we had
Right.
a story in the paper and the other paper didn't have it, the Sun didn't have it, the Globe didn't have it. It was a scoop. But these days with Twitter, nobody gets a scoop.
No.
So our assignment, Mark Zielinski and myself, was to go and find David Wells the night before because he was having a press conference under the tent at Bobby Maddock the next day. And so Zorro and I tried to figure out where he might go, and we figured he would spend his last night with David Cohn, best friend. and they would go to a strip club. I think it was the Pink Pony. So that was our assignment, to go there and find David
You
Wells.
couldn't raise your hand fast enough.
So we park in the lot, go to the door. It's $25 cover charge, and it's a giant poker chip. That's your entry. And the poker chip can be exchanged for a lap dance. But I needed the poker chip as a receipt for my expenses.
Sure.
So we went around and I scoured the entire place and asked all the girls, "Have you seen David Wells?"
Have
And
you
nobody
seen this
had.
man? You hold up a photo.
Anyway, we left empty-handed, and he showed up the next day.
Sans poker chip, of course.
Oh yeah, I had my poker chip.
Oh, really? Sure
Yeah,
you
I
did.
attached it to my expense account, and they
Yeah.
paid me back for it, $25.
Yeah.
So it's all good. But those are the stories from
So you
spring.
never found David.
The next morning in the tent, when he
Yeah.
unplugged Channel 9 because they had come and parked their satellite truck on his lawn the night before, I said, "Oh, well, that's where he was."
That's that's right. Damn. The most obvious spot.
The most obvious spot at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we both agree about.
Well, if anybody wants to, every year, first thing I would do is go down to the Seventh Sun Brewery, which not a shock, at the bottom of Main Street, just at the beach there, and enjoy a mangrove, which was still to this day, I think, for reasons beyond the quality of the beer, just being there is my favorite beer of all time. So if anybody's heading down there, I encourage you to go to a wonderful little brewery that plays hard rock music and serves tremendous beer, and you can have one for me. So that's my request to anybody heading down there this year.
So we are covering all bases. We've got the gambling show. We've got
Yep.
the travel log. We're recommending places
I
to
could give you a
go.
lot of craft brewery references, definitely.
All right. So overnight there was news that Bregman had signed for 3 years and $120 million with the Red Sox. There's thoughts that he could play second base and leave Devers at third base, and they have first baseman. It seems to me that everyone is trying to get a job before camps open, before a full squads report. Is that sort of why everything seems to be hastening at this point, Mal?
I think if you just look back, I mean, and perhaps it's a small sample, but if you look back at recent years, I think there's some evidence that guys who get into a camp late, are a little behind the eight ball and struggle a little bit, and it's not as easy to get rolling. Baseball players are such, have such habits and rituals that you're used to the routine of full spring training. I think guys want to get in there, and anybody would with a new club, right? Um, there certainly becomes a limit to maximizing your dollars and making sure you're ready to play. So I'm not surprised that there's a little bit more of a push for guys to get into camp before it starts, and I think that's good for everybody, including the game of baseball. So I mean, it won't always be that way, but I think you've seen some guys get in there late, last minute, and not be ready to go. So, which is detrimental to their future earnings too. So, um, it's good for the game.
Yeah, the MLB trade rumors, and we reference them a lot on this show, on the podcast. They have a top 50 free agent list that they publish on November the 2nd, and they add to it. And then they record who signs and where.
Yep.
And you just check that list to see who else is available that's worth signing. And I looked at the list last night, and unsigned, you got to go all the way down to Andrew Heaney in terms of guys that are unsigned. And then you got Jose Quintana, Kyle Gibson. These are bottom feeders in the top 50 and even on the others list, or the also ran list. Robertson is surprising, a
Sure. Yeah.
reliever that even though he's late 30s,
Yeah. He's kind of
pretty
old.
effective last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Turnbull, Spencer Turnbull, JD Martinez, who might be done. Justin Turner, no surprise.
Yeah, it's supply and demand for those guys, right? And
Yeah, Lance
that's
Lynn,
not a
who
lot of
they were
demand.
talking about Lance Lynn becoming a closer. You don't just at 40 years old, after being tattooed as a starter,
Yeah.
say, I want to be a closer.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
not the way it works.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, by and large, there's not very many um, players. It might it might come down to needs by position rather than talent. For instance, the Jays might still be looking for that backup catcher to share the 60 starts. I mean,
Well,
you
there
look at,
should be.
yeah.
And you
So
can get that at
they
a
don't have
reason.
any catchers on that list, but for their needs, there are catchers out there and available.
Correct.
But the as to where the Blue Jays stand in terms of top talent, I know you're not surprised, and I'll get your reaction on this, that the Blue Jays in the top 100 fantasy recommendations by Yahoo and MLB Pipeline, top 100 recommendations, the Blue Jays have two players on the list, and that includes pitchers and position players. So Vlad Guerrero Jr. comes in at number 13, and Anthony Santander comes in at number 72. And that is an indictment for a team that is top 10 in payroll, has four players making 20 million plus, and yet only two of the top 100 players in baseball. How do you see that?
Well, I think that's very indicative of where the organization's at. That's what we've talked about a lot. You've got an extraordinarily high payroll, good on you, without extraordinarily high talent right now. And that's the worst place to be. I mean, it's one thing to have two guys on the top 100 and you're the Pirates or what I'm just whatever, or you're not spending the money and you've got, a direction you've rid yourself of contracts. They have a bloated payroll without, an overly great ball club. I mean, at best, it's a middling ball club right now at best. Um, and I think, that's the concern of how this regime has built or not built this program or what they've ended up with. But when you got two guys in the top 100 on the major league roster, at least you can look to the minor league system, right, to fill those needs. And
Yeah, yeah. We'll get there. We'll get there in a second. At
right,
least you can look to the minor league system. But to me, at the major league level, there's a couple of problems in that you've also got Jose Barrios about to start making 20 million in a couple or next year in a couple of years, and Andres Jimenez with his glove at second base will be making $20 million plus for the final 3 years of his contract. So it's not just the four that are there now. One of them is Vlad.
right.
Now, the problem with all
Tick,
that
tick,
bloated
tick.
payroll, the problem with all that bloated payroll is you're paying players for what they did for someone else. You're rewarding them for what they did for someone else, which is why we at Exit Philosophy have been so adamant about the need to sign Vlad, because he's done everything in his career for you, not for someone else. He's not like a Kevin Gosman. He's not like a Jose Barrios who was in Minnesota for all those years. He's not like a Chris Bassett. This is your homegrown guy. So, what is the problem with rewarding him commensurate to what the market is now telling you is his value? Because otherwise, you've got guys not in the top 100 that you are paying top money
Well,
to because of what they did somewhere else.
and there's a couple points there. One, what's stopping you, is a lot of those contracts. And I know people might disagree with that. And I do think there is a solution around that. But yeah, regardless if they sign Vladdy or not, and I've made this point over and over again, you've missed the opportunity. You've missed the opportunity with your homegrown talent to get it at a reasonable price. That's what other organizations do. So you can carry those bloated 30-something-year-old guys who aren't still in the top 100, but they're just outside of it. The Jays rotation is full of quality pitchers. but they're on the wrong side. But that's okay if you've got your young guys signed to reasonable deals, you've locked them up, and jokes aside, you've got a pipeline of guys coming up where you marry it, and that's how you win championships. That's missing. The other piece is this isn't a menu. I think people, when they're sitting here, think that your organizations just get to pick and choose off the menu. Well, I'll take a Vladdy and I'll give him that. And this isn't fantasy baseball. This goes well beyond the dollars and cents. This goes well beyond that. These are called relationships. These are called experiences humans have. And there's a reason we're at this position today. You just don't get to pick and choose off the menu. This free agent, pay our guy this, do this. It's not MLB The Show. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more that goes into signing a guy to a contract and why we're in this position we're in with how many days left before Vladdy's deadline that he's given you.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, you still got to get it done. Regardless, you're here, get it done, and then you can move forward.
On exit philosophy, weeks ago, we recommended a path to getting Vlad under contract that would make him the third highest paid
Correct.
player in Major League Baseball. Not the third best player, but the third highest paid player. And it makes it more palatable when the fact is that he's your player. And
Mhm.
just what we were talking about. But there's been leaks, there's been coming out of sources in Major League Baseball, and everybody's got their own sources who have their own agendas. And in terms of Vlad, they're talking about 400 million dollars. And maybe he will. But we don't know. And our recommendation got Vlad into the mid 500s for 14 years plus the coming season where he's already under contract. So, and that was the mid 500s. And now they're going, well, 400, he may do it, but we don't know how much of that deferral is going to be a part of that and how they can downsize the real value, which to me is all bullshit. It's if it's 550, it's 550. And the fact
Well,
that you defer money,
it does
otherwise,
it does reduce the real value of current
yeah,
day
yeah,
money. There's no question. But
but in terms of what and it all has to do with the luxury tax and calculating that dollar figure. I mean, there's nothing embarrassing about paying Vlad 550 for 15 years. But what is embarrassing is that 550 gets broken down and now you're paying luxury tax. And if there's a way of sort of manipulating it, then they'll do it. It's like the NBA where at trade deadline you have no goddamn idea what any of these they get
what a
PJ
mess.
Tucker and they send him on his way, they buy him out.
Yeah.
Like, is that better for a sport than what baseball has with no
No,
salary cap? I
it's
don't think so.
it's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, no, 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 no. I think baseball has the best, system in place if you're gonna, as far as a union and well, obviously because the union is the strongest. So,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's the
Strongest not
best system.
only in sports but in organized labor in North America. It's the best union uh, existing. So to think that you can negotiate a salary cap with that union, you've never won as ownership. You've never won a negotiation. So don't even think about it.
And the absurdity of fans to think salary caps are a positive for anything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That is absurd, and that just tells you right there that the strong union. The first thing you do is you crack that nut because it's absurd. There's other ways to create competitive balance in sport other than throwing it entirely on the labor market.
So let me get back to a point that I interrupted you on earlier. Is that if you've got a top 10 payroll and you've only got two of the top 100 players, surely your minor league system is going to back it up and you're going
Yeah.
to be like crawling with kids
Hmm.
soon. Isn't that right, Mal?
Well, you would think so. I mean, you would think so because, when you know, you're not doing so well at the major league level, there must be there's room for players to come. There's room for development and there's room, for the next wave. But as I'm sure you'll point out, how many guys do they have in the top 100 in the minor league system?
They've got number 87. That's their top prospect. Number 87, shortstop Arjun Namala.
Yeah.
who would be the first Indian Indian
Yeah.
heritage,
Big
or
power bat.
yeah,
Yeah.
who's like filling out, and he started poorly last year in his
Swing
first.
and miss is a concern for
Yeah,
sure. But yeah.
and then he started to develop, and his body started to
Yeah.
fill out as he got into the weight room and whatever. And then number 88 is a guy who hasn't thrown a pitch in the organization, Trey Savage. I think he was at East Carolina, and he was the first round draft pick last year. So the Blue Jays still only have one drafted player since 2020 who has made the major leagues.
So there's
That's
two in the major league level and two in the minor league level. And that's sad. And as a Blue Jay fan, that's the real issue. Like obviously, I think we're all intrigued of what this team is going to be this year because they are going for it, whatever that means. And the management has made that very clear. There's a lot of reasons, mostly their own employment. Um, but it's going to make the season very interesting. There's no question. But long term, that there's nothing but alarm bells ringing right now. And I don't see how that's going to be fixed on any level, especially with the approach of going for it. It's actually the wrong approach because you should be worried about sustainability and development and making sure this pipeline is just feeding and you're at least competitive to a certain level. You've got to be.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's not the wrong approach when you've built a pleasure palace and you need to fill it.
Well, it's the wrong approach because you're not going to be good after this
Well,
year.
I
So,
mean,
I mean,
you know how it is as a PR person. Uh, the tires that are being pumped in the minor league system, all of those recommendations come from within the organization.
yeah,
Like, so there might be two or three players in the minor league system who accelerate, who just speed through the process from A
sure,
to
it's
AA to
baseball.
triple A. And you got guys like Orelvis Martinez who might bounce back, and at one point he was top five prospect in all of baseball,
Right.
and he might bounce.
Yeah.
So
It's not
so,
exactly an exact science, that's for
but
sure.
but these are the people who are paid to rank, and they've got two Blue Jays in the top 100, 87 and 88 overall of prospects. And this is for a team that only has two of the top 114 players at the major league level.
It's hard to argue that the organization is in a healthy spot. It's hard to make that argument. Now, can things change? Right. But there doesn't appear to be any Gunnar Henderson sitting there developing, and players of that ilk where they appear to be no doubters. Let's put it that way. So things can change for sure, and hopefully they do. But like I said, there's a million reasons to have concerns, and as a Blue Jay fan, the all or nothing attempt to make the playoffs this year is going to have repercussions. It just is. At some point, you probably need to move those assets, and you could have done them earlier if you couldn't get them signed. But that's why you go, do they trade Bo? Do they trade Vladdy? As if you can't find a solution. And the answer should be yes, if you're looking out for future years of the club.
Well,
It should be.
that's why to me, if that's not going to be your direction as a front office as an organization, then they need to make sure that they throw as much money at Vlad as they need to,
Correct.
and
Correct.
because the fan base is disgruntled, and they need them to be gruntled by opening day.
Right. You need some hope somewhere.
Yeah,
You need an anchor and you need something to sell other than we play for a whole country, as
yeah,
you say. It might be your superstar first baseman.
and like Santander, if he's there for the next 5 years and Vlad disappears during this season or at the end of this season, what is Santander? He's like a mediocre defensive outfielder who
He's
only hit
he's
home runs.
he's someone you trade.
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And you trade Bo and you trade Vlad and you try to restock with legit prospects. Like you
Right.
try to go,
But
you got
I
to,
don't want to go down that road because
yeah,
I'm still hoping that they do sign Vlad before any.
100%.
So
100%. We'll know that very soon, and you'll hear all our analysis on the Exit Philosophy
oh,
podcast because it's certainly going to be, like I said, this whole season's going to be a roller coaster. I think it's going to be so much fun to watch.
so let's wrap it up with this week's top five list, which is actually going to be a top 10 list. Spring has sprung and fantasy drafts are all over the landscape. People are planning their fantasy drafts for the coming season, and we're going to stick on Exit Philosophy. We're going to stick with our top 10 recommendation for American League position players,
All
1 to
right.
10. We'll start at 1, we'll go down to 10. And you go first on 1. I'll give you mine, and then I'll go first on 2, and it's a snake top 10.
Yeah, I didn't want to do this, but it's just hard not to. I mean, one has to be Aaron Judge, right? I tried to find excuses not to put him there, and maybe you can, but the production he's shown over the last few years, I mean, he's just a little bit above, head and shoulders above everybody else. So, he's number one for me. What do you have? I don't think there's much to talk about there,
Well, yeah, there is.
other than injuries and
I got
things like
Bobby
that.
Witt Jr. Bobby Witt Jr. plays
For sure.
every day, plays 150 plus games every season. Bobby Witt Jr. can be a 35, 50 home run, stolen base guy.
Yep.
And shortstop's a premium position. I know there's a lot of good offensive shortstops, and that's basically what the fantasy drafts are. They don't go into defense or glove work or anything. And Bobby Witt playing every day, going 35 to 50, having an OPS in the 900s. Um, that's my guy. I fill my shortstop hole and I let her rip after that.
Well, if we're
Yeah.
talking about where they play too, he would be a number one. But I'm just going based on offensive production.
Well,
Um,
I am also, but I just
yeah,
threw in the position
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
My number two is Aaron Judge.
Okay.
Kind of hard to drop him any lower than number two. I mean, even when he was struggling at the beginning of last season and fantasy league owners were going, oh my God, what did I do? All of a sudden he gets hot and he gets hot all the time. He's out of center field, I believe, so that'll allow him some,
Yeah.
less stress
Yep.
defensively.
Yep.
I think it caught up with him in game 5 of the World
The
Series,
whole playoffs.
the whole playoffs. Yeah, so Aaron Judge is my number 2.
My number two is Bobby Witt. So I mean, we just had a reversal on the numbers there. Um, my number three is an oldie, but well, it's just you almost overlook him because he's so consistent. It's Jordan Alvarez. Um, he's just a professional hitter at this point. You know, he kind of reminds me a bit of Carlos Beltran as he got a little older too. Just such a smart hitter, I think you just pencil it in his numbers. You know what I mean? There's other guys I wanted to with potential to put higher, but for me, number three is Alvarez. What do you have?
Number 3, I put Jose Ramirez in. Um, people are stunned at how many steals he has.
Mhm.
He goes out and he gives you 100% every day, and one of the best offensive players in baseball. And I got him at number 3 because of his consistency year to year.
Works for me. That would be your
Uh,
next, right?
number 4, I'll probably surprise you, but I love guys like this. I'm for number 4, I'm putting Jaron Duran.
Oh, he didn't make my top 10. He just missed out. But I
Yeah.
love players
Oh
like
yeah.
that too.
I
But
love he developed so much between his first year and his next year, and his numbers were all-star caliber, like all-star, first team all-star outfield caliber. And he's to me, he's the future of the game, one of the faces of the game coming up, and he's on my list at number 4.
yeah, I strictly just offensively, I didn't see him quite there yet. But I mean, I love every part of watching him play for sure. So my number four is Gunnar Henderson. Um, what's not to like? I think we're primed for a big explosion here. Um, and I mean, he's awesome already, and the position he plays, and that club is so much fun to watch. Um, Speaking of the face of baseball, about Duran, I mean, take your pick. Gunner's right there. So for me, he's number four, and then on my number five is the local kid, Mr. Guerrero. So Vladdy, obviously, you know, you're still some hesitancy after coming off those 2 years prior. I'm so happy. I loved Vladdy as a 15, 16-year-old kid and just the raw power and ability. I'm so happy that he did what he did last year. He became such a pure hitter. What I love the most is the ability just to put the ball in play and hit line drives all over the yard. It's just a joy to watch. So, I mean, that gives you a reason why you think it's going to continue. But he's five because you want to see it again. You know what I mean? Let's just keep seeing it. So, who do you got at five?
Number five, I got Gunner. Kind of hard to pass him any lower than that because, like I said with Bobby Witt Jr., shortstop, that's a premium. Like he and Bobby Witt at shortstop are head and shoulders above anyone else in that category. I mean,
The
Seager,
reason why you watch the game, when you
yeah,
tune into it, the game they're playing.
yeah. So that's my number five. Number six for me is Jordan Alvarez, just because he's such a pure hitter and he never has a bad at bat, never gets cheated, and when he connects in that rinky-dink ballpark, it goes.
Yes, it does. Yep. My number six is Jose Ramirez. You've said all you need to say about that. So just quietly in that organization too, just keeps doing what he does over there, and it's a reason why they're in the playoffs often. So number seven for me is a guy I think I expect even a bounce back from Corey Seager. Uh, just such a legit bat, but has had some down years too, right? So
Hmm.
surprisingly, but I, my last four I think are interesting. But Seager to me is a premium player on a premium team, and I expect a big year out of him. What do you got at seven?
Number seven, I got Vlad. I'm like you. I was thrilled to see and it wasn't all season where he was great. It was like he had a slower start, a sort of feeding off the year before, and then he got it. And what he got was when he was in the minor leagues, he was a more walks than strikeouts guy. His knowledge of the strike zone was superb. He didn't chase. And I found like when he was going through his struggles for 2 years, he would allow umpires to intimidate him with calls 6 inches off the plate, 3 inches off the plate, and then he would start chasing. He would not trust his own strike zone. And I think he's going to be like a monster when Robo Ump comes in because he'll be correct.
Right, right.
And he didn't have the status of I
It's
remember
how you
Pete.
hit 320 too. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. He didn't yet have the status of a guy like Pete Rose, who was intimidating to umpires, and if he didn't swing, that was called a ball.
Yeah, that's the Frank Thomas, right?
Yeah,
My
Frank
gosh.
Thomas.
Yeah.
But Vlad is so cuddly and lovable, and umpires go, "Screw you, that's a strike." And all he does is mope and then strike out on a pitch in the same spot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the second two-thirds of last season as a learning process, as getting away from what he had failed at the two previous years. And I look for a big year from him. Um, and he does play every day. He does go out there every day. And that to me carries a lot of weight. I might have put him ahead of Jordan because Alvarez sometimes misses stretches of games, but 6, 7, 7, 6. Those are my two guys in those spots. Number eight for me, I got Marcus Simeon. I just love him as an offensive player. I know he's getting older, but he's
Yeah.
another guy who plays 155 plus games, and he doesn't want out of the lineup ever. Um, that may be a bad pick. He may just be getting worn down by age and that same desire to play every day, even when he's hurt. So, I mean, that's my number eight. I may, if I was drafting, I may regret it.
Well, my number eight is a guy who found himself last year, and I think he's become a very smart hitter, and he's putting up some big time numbers, and I can't wait to see what he does in the new ballpark. It's Brent Rooker. Um, that guy can hit, and it's taken a while for him to get there, but I think when you're looking at offensive production, you can't ignore him. It's just impossible. Now you know, you got to do it again because it's not like he's got 8 years of incredible production like a Yordan Alvarez, but he's a legit hitter, and I think he's got to be on my top 10. So my last two guys are interesting. I'll give you the one for now, but I think this is a breakout for Wyatt Langford.
Oh,
Um,
I was pondering him so much. I thought I might include him down low like that, but he didn't make my list.
I think he's poised to really break out. And I mean, he was hardly bad. You know what I mean? You can see the talent is immense. I think he's one of those young players that you're going to be watching for many years to come. And I think this, if I'm taking, you know, if I'm building a fantasy team, I'm targeting that guy because obviously that's a guy who's got hopefully many years of high-end production. So he's my number nine. Who's your nine and 10?
My nine is Rafael Devers. Whether he plays third base or if Bregman comes in, they're saying Bregman might play second base.
Yeah.
But if Bregman plays third and Devers goes to first, it might even make him a better hitter. I don't know. But it's just his consistency and his production. He deserves to be in the top 10 to me, and so I've got him at number nine. Number 10, I've got Corey Seager. You mentioned him earlier. I'm of a same feeling. He's not with those other shortstops, the younger guys, because he doesn't have the speed aspect of his game, but his offensive production and the fact that he's in a pretty good lineup are going to help his fantasy numbers, and he rounds up my top 10.
Well, my last guy is a bit of a, you know, he's not any of those guys that you mentioned that I don't have on my list, but it's a guy I think for me I enjoy watching and I think he's got more to give to, and that's Riley Green. So
I got him
I
written down in my
really
others.
yeah, I really like the way he hits it and swings it, and I think there's more in there. So if you're looking for, you know, potential surprise guys that maybe aren't the obvious ones, and you're getting down to number 10, for me, he makes my list at number 10. I love me some Riley Green, and I love watching that team a little bit. So.
Yeah, I had a few guys left over that were borderline. Julio Rodriguez was one. I had Wyatt Langford. Jazz Chisholm, I think, is overrated in terms
So
of
do I.
he's playing in New
So
York
do
and
I.
Yankee. Everybody goes, oh, he's going to have a great year. I had Rooker on my list. Westberg, we've talked about Westberg a
He
lot.
almost made my list too,
Yeah,
Westberg. I wanted to, and I tried. It's just like there's just he, you know,
but here's the one that you is a head scratcher. Trout. Like
well, I
what?
know.
How many times has Trout ever been left out of a fantasy draft top 10?
You just can't though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean just the injuries. Like he's not who he was. I mean, he'll still be productive, but he's not a top 10 player.
I would say if you're in a draft, if you're in a fantasy draft and he's available in the fourth round, that's likely. He'd likely be available in the fourth. It might be
Right.
worth a flyer at that point, you know?
For sure he is. And the guy you mentioned too is what happened to Julio Rodriguez last year? I mean, a shell of himself. And you can't put him on that list because of that. Like he just lost all confidence. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It may also be a case of that Seattle lineup was so punchless that he may have been the guy that they decided to pitch around, you know?
Well, he swung at a lot of that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can pitch around somebody and get them out.
Yes.
We've
Well, and
seen,
that's and I just couldn't put him on my list.
yeah.
Like he'd be on it last year, 100%. But
So anyone who goes with our advice and ends up winning the pool, you can email. We'll send our email address so you can e-transfer some money for us. Just a small show of appreciation
Well,
for.
they should have all that extra money from football. So,
And before we wrap up, I would just like to ask for an update on the Niagara Ball Club that you've got on the go starting at the end of, is it the end of May or is it the
well,
end?
first start we start in early June. So,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
Obviously, lots going on. We will announce the team name next Wednesday. So,
Wow.
if anybody wants to come down to DQ Brewing next Wednesday at 11 a.m. and join us for a celebration, you're more than welcome.
Can I go?
Yeah, so we're gonna, let everybody know what the team nickname is, and obviously we'll unveil the schedule at the same time. So there's lots of reasons to be excited, and lots of information to come, and we're designing uniforms and signing players, trying anyways, and so much. Like I said, so much to do. But next Wednesday, next philosophy, we'll be able to tell you what the name is. So
Yeah, so
finally.
I'd like to be like Vanna White and turn the letters and point to things. Can I do that? As long as I
Can
get
I
a
buy a
beer at the
vowel? Yeah, that's right. I was hoping for somebody a little different in that role, but Pat Sajak, you could be. How about that?
right. All right, so that wraps it up for this edition of Exit Philosophy, and thanks for tuning in. Make sure to tell your friends, subscribe, like, and enjoy. And thanks, Mal, for co-hosting once again. And this was fun and informative. And hopefully by next week, Vlad will be signed. Who
Talk
knows?
about my ball team. We'll talk about Vladdy. A lot of big
Yeah,
news coming.
no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody, and
Thanks.
thanks, Mal.
See you next week.